Well, all the ideas out there are big ideas. All of those things that are getting made are more interesting than I am, not realizing that you are a wealth of story. I am a wealth of story, and I just have to dig deep enough to figure out, well, what story do I want to tell?
What's the difference between helping other people achieve their dreams and pursuing your own dreams?
Well, I think that for sure, pursuing my own dreams is scarier. It's a lot easier to help somebody else. But I've often said that helping someone achieve their dreams it's like there's like a crack high. I've never done crack, but I imagine it's like the crack high that you would get just because it is truly intoxicating, and I've been in that business, that world for a long time. You know, as an executive, you're constantly green-lighting things, or you're pushing something forward, or you're introducing someone to some key relationship, or you're hiring a staff for a show or a director, and making that phone call is an amazing phone call. I remember when we were picking up Living Single, and I happened to be at home, and my boss at the time, Tom Noonan, said, "Hey, you can make this phone call." He says, "This is your show. You can make this phone call." And I called Yvette Lee Bowser, and I screamed in her ear, and it was such a high-pitched scream because I was so excited, and there was this sort of pause on the other end of the call, and she's like, "I didn't hear a thing that you just said." I was so excited. So it's a really wonderful feeling to be able to support somebody. I think it's easy for me because I think there may be the difference between when someone is just starting out, particularly, and I've obviously worked with a lot of writers and directors who are just emerging. What they need most, besides the acknowledgement, the encouragement, and the general support of helping shape a piece of material, is they really need those connections. And I've got a lot of connections, and so making those phone calls is not hard for me. And that's part of it. And what I find the differences between people who are just emerging and struggling and the people who are really firing on all cylinders is sometimes their network. Let's just say everything equal. And the material's all equal, and they're great people everywhere, which I do find that they're great people everywhere. The people who are connected and the people who we are able to create relationships for, those relationships exponentially just explode. And so I just at this point, for many of those, I just lend my connections. And that's the difference between, someone moving forward and someone not moving forward, oftentimes. So that part's easy. For myself, it's harder because I sit there and I'm wallowing in my own material, right? And sometimes you're trying to figure out, well, what do you do next? And how do you navigate? You're trying to put your business hat on and go, well, if I work on this, it's going to take me away from that. So what am I going to do? And what's the material I'm putting out in the marketplace? And then I have to really tap into my own personal mishigas about, well, what's my stuff that I want to, what do I want to say? And who do I want to be? And that takes a lot of work, emotional work, that making a phone call does not tax my brain, but doing my own personal work is hard. So I do think, focusing on myself has been a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's also time, right?
Do you think that maybe being conditioned to feel guilty for wanting to do something on your own? I mean, there's an air of selfishness with any creative pursuit where it seems like, oh, well, it's one of these sort of, artists that they're just going to disregard everything and go off and create. Is there some kind of a stigma with wanting to do your own thing creatively?
I don't know. I think for me, I'm at this place in my life where I've got an empty nest. And even if my kids are here, they're adult kids. So they know that if I'm going to lock myself away, that it's okay. I think it gets a little harder with my mother, who wants to go to Costco every week. And I'm like, didn't we just go to Costco? And Costco now, it used to be like going to Costco with mom was you're in and out in 45 minutes. And if, you leave with a bunch of stuff. And now she likes to linger. And when she asked me if I want to go to Costco with her. The guilt that I feel about, no, I really don't want to spend 2 hours in Costco. And it seems trivial, but I think that's indicative of when someone else is asking for your time. And when that person is really important to you and you want to give that time, but you don't always want to give that time all the time, then yeah, you have to make some choices. Sometimes that family, dinner is like the last thing you want to do. So you have to negotiate. It's important to negotiate your family time for sure.
They've got great samples.
They do have great samples, although they're not always vegetarian samples, and that's my issue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and from being on the other end of doing samples in the past, you meet people that they want to talk to you, and that's their only outlet right there. And could be vice versa, and it's mutual. Right. But I know you had written some posts about riding the bus.
Yes.
And some of the interesting people that you had met, and it's the same for probably doing some of these samples and some of the people you encounter in the grocery store.
That was one of the best. I think COVID shut down my bus riding quite considerably. But from 2015 to 2020, I rode the bus exclusively. And very rarely was I in a car. And it was the best, most, relaxing time. You would not think that it would be. But I think, if you're stressed for time, and there was one day that I was trying to do it, getting to the airport to go to India, and I was stressed like crazy because it was a bus ride that took way longer than it should have. But for the most part, I met so many amazing people. I learned about my town, my city. I really got a chance to engage with a lot of the world in a way that I hadn't in a really long time. And it's a weird thing to say because in New York, you're always in public transportation. In LA, you're not. You're usually in a car. But it was a pretty magical kind of 5 years that I do look forward to. And I'm a talker anyway, so I will chat people up at the drop of a hat. So just put me in a place where there's more people and I'll start talking.
Why wasn't it okay for you to pursue your writing dreams when you were a little bit younger?
Well, when I was coming out of college, my stepdad, who passed away just before COVID, we had a very interesting conversation. Again, I remember exactly where we had this conversation. It was on the back stoop of his house, and he wanted me to have a real job, and he was concerned. He was concerned that I wasn't going to be able to make a living in the industry, and so he had recommended that I take a secretarial job working for a company downtown. I think it was an interior design company. That couldn't have been farther from who I was personally because I have terrible taste in decorating. And I know where it came from. It came from his fear that I needed to have some means of support. And he had grown up in the Depression. And I believe his father was a dentist, and he ended up going into the dental field, and he was a dentist. But what he really wanted to be was a writer. And he'd written some books along the way. He'd written them about dentistry. If you want to buy one, it's J.W. Friedman. I don't know, you can look him up. But he had never really ventured out and took it seriously or took himself seriously. And the short stories that he wrote were just beautiful. And I considered at one point making one of them into a short film, but it's just beautiful work. And then he decided he'd had this idea sort of locked away inside of him for years, and he finally wrote it in his 70s. And it's a book out there. I don't even know where you can find it now, but I think it's called The Seventh Millennium, and it's it's not my cup of tea, but it's certainly everything. It's underneath. It's about his first marriage, and there's like a lot of themes that come up for him. And it was his magnum opus. It was his thing that he wanted to put out there, and he wrote this one little book, and then talked about it for the next 20 years of his life. And I think his concern was that, I think it was a real fear that I think a lot of parents have about their kids. Are they going to make it, or are they not going to be able to make this happen for themselves. So that coupled with, you know, the parental pressure from him. On the other hand, my mom's going, go for it, do whatever you want, it's okay. But that combined with I needed to make real money, and the job that I had at the time, you know, when I was a writer's assistant, was probably barely making, you know, rent. But again, it's trying to figure out, well, what's the trajectory and how can you pursue it? And when you don't see people who are doing it, and you don't see that there's a pathway. And I was writing on a show, a writer's assistant on a show where it was 2 Latino leads and an entirely white male writer's room. And that's even in my own, you know, so basically my own backyard, and I can't seem to figure out and navigate how to get in there. I think that there's societal things that happen where, you know, and I don't think that this is unusual. I think if you look back and hear a lot of stories from a lot of people around that time, and even before, it was a hard business to break into. It still is a hard business to break into. And when you're a woman of color, you know, you've got a couple of, the pathways were just not plentiful. So I think that if I had been, I don't know that I knew, I don't think I had any other options. I don't think I was missing anything. I think I was doing the right things. I was writing the scripts. I was working on my craft. I do think that there was a frustration at a certain point where I did stop writing because it was just too painful. But I think I also got in my own head. And I think if I was going to give anybody some advice now, or even if I was going to talk to myself, you know, back in the 80s, I would have said, just keep writing. And I think I also didn't understand at the time that I had something to say. I think I was really probably putting up a roadblock because I thought, well, all the ideas out there are big ideas. All of those things that are getting made are more interesting than I am, not realizing that you are a wealth of story. I am a wealth of story, and I just have to dig deep enough to figure out, well, what story do I want to tell? I could tell a story about riding on the bus, and it could be an emotional, heartfelt, amazing story. I, at the time, probably would not have recognized that, but it took me a long time and a pathway through the executive ranks in order to get to the other side and go, oh yeah, there's value in just about everything.